We need to get them inside now.
I know, I'm coming.
Welcome back to Soul Spirit Storiesy, a place where hearts speak and souls listen. If you are someone who believes in kindness, compassion, and the power of unexpected encounters, then you are in the right place. Today's story is about a man who had everything money could buy, but still felt a silent emptiness in his heart. And how one moment one stranger changed everything. There was a man named Ethan. He was known across the city as one of the youngest CEOs to build a business empire from scratch. He was confident, determined, and respected. But behind his success, there was a story that very few knew. Ethan was a single father. His wife, the love of his life, had passed away during childbirth, leaving him with a baby girl named Lily. Since then, Ethan had devoted every piece of love he had to his daughter. But even with all his effort, there were moments when the loneliness would quietly sit beside him. One evening, Ethan was returning from a business trip. He was tired, his shoulders heavy from meetings and responsibilities. His private driver pulled into a small roadside cafe because Ethan wanted coffee and a moment to breathe. The evening sky was dim and cold. As he walked toward the cafe, he heard a soft cry. Not just one cry, but two, like two tiny echoes of pain. He turned his head toward the sound and saw a woman sitting on a bench near the window. Her nurse uniform was slightly wrinkled, and her hair was tied in a messy bun. She held two small babies, twins, barely a few months old. One child was crying loudly, while the other clung to her shirt. Tears were falling from her eyes, but she tried her best to stay strong. She rocked both babies gently, whispering, "Shh, Mommy's here. Mommy's here." Ethan felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't ignore. He took a slow step toward her and spoke softly, "Are you okay?" The woman quickly wiped her tears and tried to smile. "I'm fine. Just a long day." Her voice broke in the middle of her sentence. Ethan sat beside her. "I'm Ethan," he said gently. She hesitated for a moment. "I'm Grace." The babies continued to fuss. One of them had tiny hands that reached out, as if wanting comfort from someone, anyone. "May I?" Ethan asked. Grace nodded, and he carefully picked up one of the babies. Surprisingly, the baby calmed almost immediately in his arms. Ethan smiled softly. "I've had some practice." Grace looked at him, curious. "You have kids?" "One, a daughter. She's 4 now," he replied. Grace exhaled, and her shoulders relaxed slightly. "It's just been difficult," she said. "I work at the hospital. My husband, he left when he found out I was pregnant with twins. I've been trying to work, take care of them, pay rent, and just keep going. But some days are harder than others." Her voice trembled, not from weakness, but from exhaustion. Ethan listened silently. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He simply allowed her to speak. Grace continued, "I had to bring them with me today because the sitter cancelled. I barely slept last night, and I just feel so alone." Ethan looked at her with a sense of recognition, as if he understood that emptiness more than anyone could imagine. "I know how that feels," he said quietly. "To do everything alone. To love someone so much that you forget to love yourself." Grace looked at him, her eyes reflecting her pain and strength. "How do you do it?" she asked. Ethan took a deep breath. "One day at a time, and by allowing myself to accept help when it's offered." Grace lowered her gaze. "I'm not used to asking for help." "That doesn't mean you don't deserve it," Ethan replied. There was silence for a moment. The kind of silence where two hearts recognize each other's scars. Ethan offered to drive Grace home. She resisted at first, but eventually exhaustion defeated pride. When they arrived at her apartment, Ethan was shocked. Not because it was small or simple, but because it was unbelievably neat and lovingly arranged. Everything was carefully placed. Everything smelled like warmth. Even in hardship, Grace had created a home. He gently placed the baby in a crib, while Grace laid down the other. For a moment, he simply stood there watching the two tiny miracles sleeping peacefully. "You're doing an amazing job," he said softly. Grace turned to him, and tears filled her eyes again, this time not from pain, but from being seen. Days turned into weeks. Ethan would check on Grace, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just sitting and talking. And sometimes, in the silence of late evenings, they would simply hold the babies together, sharing quiet moments that said more than words ever could. Lily, Ethan's daughter, and the twins began to grow attached. They laughed together, played together, and slowly, something unexpected began to bloom in the space between Ethan and Grace. Not romance in a dramatic or sudden way, but in the gentle understanding of two hearts who had suffered. Two people who had loved and lost. Two souls who had learned to survive. One evening, while watching the children play in the living room, Grace whispered, "Why have you helped me so much?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes soft. "Because someone once told me love is not something we wait to receive. It's something we give freely, even when we're still healing. And because I care." Truly, Grace felt tears slide down her cheeks again. But this time, she didn't hide them. Ethan reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. There, in that moment, surrounded by three small hearts, full of innocence and laughter, two adults finally found a new meaning of home. Not the one built with walls, but the one built with love. Shared pain, understanding, and hope. Thank you for listening to this heart-touching story. If it touched your heart, share it with someone who needs warmth today. And remember, sometimes life doesn't give us the people we want, but the people we need.